And within this continued flow, the mind begins to notice how little effort is actually required to remain inside order. Effort appears only when we resist structure. When we stop resisting, everything slows naturally. The ancient world did not experience resistance as virtue. Resistance was seen as friction. Friction generated heat. Heat exhausted systems. So harmony was preferred. Harmony did not mean agreement. It meant alignment. You did not need to like the structure. You only needed to move with it. Movement with structure feels lighter than movement against it. This is why early teachings emphasized acceptance, not resignation. Acceptance. Acceptance reduces internal conflict. Internal conflict consumes energy. Energy was precious. So emotional restraint was not suppression, but conservation. The fewer inner battles a person fought, the more reliable they became. Reliability mattered more than brilliance. A reliable worker sustains a system. A brilliant but unpredictable one threatens it. This preference shaped values quietly. Consistency became admirable. Volatility became suspect. Even emotions were expected to follow pattern. Grief had rituals. Joy had limits. Anger had boundaries. Nothing was allowed to overflow. Overflow spills into others. Spilled emotion disrupts coordination. So feeling was structured. Just like labor. This may sound restrictive, but it was protective. Protection allowed communities to endure long periods of uncertainty. When famine came, panic did not help. When floods arrived, rage did not rebuild. Calm action did. Calm action requires training. Training requires repetition. Repetition requires patience. Patience became wisdom. Wisdom was not insight. It was steadiness. This is why elders were respected. Not because they knew more facts, but because they had survived cycles. Survival teaches rhythm. Rhythm teaches timing. Timing prevents collapse. The ancient world lived by timing. When to plant, when to wait, when to move, when to stop. Mistimed action was worse than no action. This is why hesitation was sometimes valued. Waiting allowed patterns to reveal themselves. Modern minds are uncomfortable with waiting. Waiting feels like loss. But in stable systems, waiting is protection. Protection is invisible. When it works, you only notice it. When it is gone, the past learned this through absence. Cities that lost rhythm fell apart quickly. Overextension led to collapse. Overconfidence led to failure. So humility was not moral. It was practical. Humility acknowledged limits. Limits preserved structure. Preserved structure allowed rest. This is why rest was ritualized. Not because people were indulgent, but because exhaustion destroys systems. Exhausted people make errors. Errors multiply. Multiplication leads to chaos. So rest was enforced. Days without work. Periods of silence. Times when nothing progressed. Progress was not constant. And because it was not constant, it remained sustainable. This is an important difference. Sustainable systems feel slow. Unsustainable systems feel exciting. Excitement burns quickly. Burnout follows. The ancient world did not chase excitement. It tolerated boredom. Boredom is not emptiness. It is stability without stimulation. Stability allows the nervous system to settle. Settled systems endure. As you listen now, this boredom may feel present. That is intentional. Nothing is trying to impress you. Nothing is escalating. Escalation implies instability. This story avoids escalation. It moves horizontally. Horizontal movement is safer than vertical leaps. The ancient world favored wide foundations over tall ambitions. Wide foundations distribute weight. Weight distributed evenly prevents collapse. This logic appears everywhere. Low buildings, broad rituals, shared responsibility. No single pillar held everything. This is why systems survived individual failure. If one part failed, others compensated. This is resilience. Resilience is quiet. You rarely notice it until something tries to break. Nothing here is trying to break, so the mind does not need to guard. Guarding keeps you awake. Release allows sleep. As thoughts slow again, notice how nothing here demands judgment. There is no correct interpretation, no hidden test, just continuity. Continuity does not ask questions, it repeats. And repetition is one of the oldest signals of safety. A heartbeat repeats, breathing repeats, waves repeat. Repetition tells the body that nothing unexpected is coming, so it lets go. You can let go too, not because something ends, but because nothing urgent begins. The pattern holds, the structure remains, and you remain inside it. Without effort, there is still no conclusion, no edge, just continuation, and continuation is enough. And as this steady movement continues, another pattern becomes easier to feel. The ancient world did not separate life into meaningful moments and empty ones. Every moment had function. Waiting was not wasted time. Silence was not absence. Stillness was not inactivity. Stillness was part of the system. When nothing moves, pressure releases. The body understands this intuitively. That is why pauses matter. Early societies built pauses deliberately, not to stop progress, but to prevent exhaustion. Harvest followed planting, rest followed labor, night followed day. Nothing was allowed to stretch endlessly. Endlessness creates strain, so cycles were enforced, not only in nature, but in human behavior. Work periods ended, festivals interrupted routine, rituals reset attention. Reset is not escape, reset is maintenance. Machines require maintenance, so do people. The ancient world did not romanticize work. Work was necessary, not virtuous. Virtue was balance. Balance allowed continuity, and continuity allowed memory. Memory was fragile. Without structure, memory dissolves into noise. So memory was anchored in dates, in seasons, in repetition. This is why so much early knowledge was rhythmic. Chants, lists, formulas. Rhythm preserves information without effort. You do not have to understand rhythm to follow it. This is why laws were written in patterns. Why prayers repeated phrases. Why myths echoed themselves. Repetition is not redundancy. It is reinforcement. Reinforcement stabilizes behavior. Behavior stabilizes society. This is not ideology. It is function. As societies grew larger, direct control became impossible. No one could watch everyone. So systems were designed that did not require watching. They relied on internalized expectation. Expectation is quieter than surveillance. It works even when alone. This is why shame and honor appear early in human cultures. Not as emotions, but as tools. Shame discourages deviation. Honor rewards alignment. Both operate internally. No guard required. The ancient world did not rely on constant punishment. Punishment is expensive. It relied on self-regulation. Self-regulation is learned through pattern. Once learned, it becomes automatic. Automatic behavior conserves energy. Energy conservation matters when survival is uncertain. So emotional regulation became social regulation. Feelings were shaped to support structure. Calm was valued. Excess was suspicious. This is why moderation appears everywhere in early wisdom. Not too loud. Not too fast. Not too much. Excess draws attention. Attention destabilizes. Stability prefers quiet. This preference shaped architecture. Spaces were symmetrical. Paths were predictable. Centers were emphasized. You always knew where you were. Orientation reduces anxiety. Disorientation creates fear. Fear disrupts cooperation. So clarity mattered. Clear roles. Clear schedules. Clear consequences. Ambiguity was dangerous. Ambiguity invites conflict. Conflict wastes energy. The ancient world avoided waste whenever possible. This is why even spiritual ideas were practical. They explained why things must be done, not why they felt meaningful. Meaning came later. Meaning is a luxury. Survival is not. So belief systems were built to support survival first. Only later did they become symbolic. Only later did people begin to ask what it all meant. At the beginning, it only mattered that it worked. And it did. For thousands of years. Cities endured. Trade expanded. Knowledge accumulated. Not because people were wiser, but because systems were steadier. Steadiness compounds. Each generation inherits stability and adds a little more. This is how complexity grows without collapse. This is how memory extends beyond individual lives. You are listening now to something shaped by this logic. Not the content, but the pace. The lack of urgency. The absence of climax. There is nothing to wait for. Waiting itself is the point. This kind of time does not push forward. It holds. Holding allows rest. As your thoughts soften again, notice how effort fades. You do not need to track each idea. You do not need to remember. Memory is not required. The structure is doing the work. Just as ancient systems carried people without constant attention. Just as calendars moved days forward whether anyone watched them or not. You are allowed to drift inside this continuity. Nothing will be missed. Nothing will be lost. The pattern does not depend on your focus. It existed before attention and continues without it. You can rest here. The rhythm holds. And there is still no end. And as this rhythm continues, it becomes easier to notice something subtle. The ancient world did not experience time as something to escape. Time was not an enemy. It was a container. Moments were not rushed through. They were occupied. To occupy time meant to give it structure. Work filled the day. Ritual marked transitions. Sleep arrived without guilt. There was no sense that something was being missed. Nothing urgent waited elsewhere. Urgency is a modern sensation. It appears when the future feels open and undefined. The past did not experience the future this way. The future was expected to resemble the past. Seasons returned. Floods came and receded. Fields were planted and harvested. Even disasters followed patterns. Predictability softened fear. This is why ancient texts rarely ask, "What comes next?" They ask, "What must be maintained?" Maintenance is quieter than ambition. Ambition imagines change. Maintenance preserves continuity, and continuity was survival. The earliest systems did not seek progress. They sought balance. Balance is not static. It requires constant adjustment, but adjustment within limits, not reinvention. This is why wisdom was associated with moderation. Not too much, not too little. Enough. Enough grain. Enough water. Enough order. Enough is calming. Too much creates strain. Too little creates fear. The systems were built to hover near enough. And because of this, life could slow. Slowness is not inefficiency. It is resilience. A slow system absorbs shock. A fast system breaks. The ancient world had learned this. Through loss, cities collapsed. Fields failed. Populations vanished. And from those absences, lessons were learned. Do not build faster than structure can hold. Do not change more than memory can absorb. Memory was fragile, so repetition protected it. Repeating a ritual is repeating a reminder, not a reminder of belief, but of position, where you stand, what you do next, what is expected. Expectation is grounding. It tells the body it does not need to decide. Decision costs energy. Energy was precious, so decisions were minimized, not through control, but through pattern. When patterns exist, choices narrow. Narrow choices reduce anxiety. Anxiety is a sign that too many outcomes feel possible. The ancient world preferred fewer outcomes. Fewer outcomes meant fewer surprises. Surprise is dangerous when survival is fragile. So the past did not chase novelty. Novelty disrupts. Stability sustains. This is why innovation was slow. When innovation occurred, it was absorbed carefully, tested against structure. If it disrupted balance, it was rejected. Not because it was wrong, but because it was risky. Risk was not admired. Risk threatened continuity. Only when a change proved it could coexist with order was it allowed to remain. This is why systems feel conservative. Conservatism here does not mean resistance to change. It means caution toward disruption. Caution keeps systems alive, and systems that survive teach others how to survive. This is how frameworks spread, not through conquest alone, but through imitation. People copied what worked. They did not copy beliefs. They copied outcomes. A city that endured became a model. Its rituals were adopted. Its laws echoed. Its calendars spread. The gods attached to these systems were optional. The structure was not. Over time, the structure detached from its stories. Stories are heavy. Structure is light. Structure travels easily. This is why we inherit frameworks without remembering their origins. We inherit assumptions that fairness matters, that order is preferable, that chaos is a threat. These assumptions feel obvious, but they are not universal. They were learned slowly, then repeated, until they felt natural. This is why modern people feel discomfort in disorder. Even creative disorder creates tension. We want things to resolve. Resolution is structural. The ancient world was built to resolve constantly, through cycles, through resets, through rituals of renewal. Nothing was meant to remain unresolved. Unresolved tension accumulates. Accumulation leads to collapse. So release was scheduled. Festivals, rest days, cleansing rituals. Even forgiveness was ritualized. Not to absolve emotion, but to restore balance. Balance was the highest value. Not happiness, not freedom. Balance. Balance allows sleep. As your breathing slows again, notice how these ideas do not push forward. They circle. Circles are calming. Circles return you to where you started, without urgency. This is intentional. The past did not move in straight lines. It moved in cycles. Cycles do not demand progress. They allow rest. You are allowed to be in a cycle now. Nothing needs to end yet. Nothing needs to conclude. The structure holds. The rhythm continues. And you can simply remain inside it. And in this continuity, something important becomes clear. The world does not ask for understanding. It asks for participation. Ancient systems were never designed to be fully grasped by individuals. They were designed to be lived inside. This is why complexity was layered, not explained. A farmer did not need to know how the calendar was calculated, only when to plant. A laborer did not need to understand the cosmic order, only where to stand. A king did not need to invent authority, only to align with it. Knowledge was distributed by function, not curiosity. And because of that, the system remained stable. Modern minds struggle with this idea. We want explanation before obedience, choice before structure. But for most of human history, it was the reverse. Structure came first. Choice happened within it. This is not oppression. This is containment. Containment prevents collapse. Imagine a river without banks. It spreads, slows, disappears. Banks do not restrict the river. They give it direction. Ancient order functioned the same way. Rules were banks. Rituals were banks. Time itself had banks. Days were divided. Years were segmented. Life stages were marked. Birth, work, rest, death. Nothing was infinite. Nothing was undefined. Undefined space creates anxiety. Defined space creates calm. This is why early societies invested so much effort into marking boundaries. City walls, property stones, sacred zones. Not to exclude, but to stabilize. When everything has edges, nothing spills uncontrollably. Even the heavens were divided. Sky from earth, light from darkness, above from below. Division was not separation. It was organization. Organization allows coexistence. Chaos does not mean movement. It means everything moving at once. The ancient world feared this deeply, not philosophically, practically. A failed harvest, an unregulated flood, a disputed border. Chaos was starvation. So order became moral, not because it was beautiful, but because it worked. This is why morality and practicality were never separate. Good was what preserved balance. Bad was what disrupted it. Intent mattered less than effect. A well-intentioned action that broke structure was still dangerous. This is foreign to modern thinking, but it explains ancient severity. Punishments were not about revenge. They were about repair. Remove the disruption. Restore the pattern. The goal was never expression. It was continuity. Continuity required silence. Too much questioning destabilizes systems. This is why wisdom was often described as knowing when not to speak. Silence was not ignorance. It was alignment. To speak was to intervene. To intervene was to risk imbalance. So many ancient teachings emphasize restraint, not because people lacked ideas, but because ideas have consequences. Every change ripples outward. When societies became large enough, ripples became dangerous. So belief evolved into habit. Habit requires no explanation. Habit survives fatigue. This is why repetition is sacred. The same prayer, the same gesture, the same phrase. Not to summon gods, but to stabilize minds. Stability is contagious. When one person moves calmly, others follow. When many follow, order appears effortless. This is why authority prefers ceremony. Ceremony slows everything down. Slowness reduces error. Error threatens structure. The ancient world did not rush because rushing breaks patterns. This is also why time itself was ritualized. New years were marked. Cycles were acknowledged. Resets were formal. Even catastrophe had ritual. Floods were remembered. Destruction was narrated. Rebuilding followed pattern. Nothing was left raw. Raw experience destabilizes memory. Narrative smooths it. This is why ancient histories are not objective. They are structured. They remove randomness. They assign meaning. Meaning absorbs shock. Without meaning, trauma fractures continuity. With meaning, even loss becomes survivable. This is not mythology. This is psychological engineering. Long before psychology had a name, the systems worked because they addressed fear quietly, not by denying it, but by containing it. Fear is strongest in uncertainty. Order reduces uncertainty, and reduced uncertainty allows sleep. As you listen now, notice how nothing demands your response. No argument, no urgency. The rhythm itself is the message. Consistency over insight. Flow over revelation. The ancient world did not seek awakening. It sought endurance. Awakening disrupts sleep. Endurance protects it. This is why so many traditions value rest not as laziness, but as alignment. Rest means nothing is wrong. Nothing urgent remains unresolved. That feeling is rare in modern life. But it is old. Older than cities. Older than writing. The need to feel that the world is holding itself together without your effort. That you can release control without consequence. Ancient systems promised this. Not individually, but collectively. As long as everyone followed the pattern, no one needed to carry the burden alone. This is why structure is comforting. It distributes responsibility. No single person must hold the world up. The world holds itself. And now, you are allowed to trust that. Let thoughts soften again. You are not missing anything. Nothing important will happen if you stop listening. The order does not need witnesses. It was designed for continuity, not attention. Let the rhythm continue whether you notice it or not. You can drift. The systems will remain. And rest is permitted. And eventually, the need to explain disappeared. When a structure has existed long enough, it no longer asks for belief. It simply is. People stop asking where rules came from when they grow up inside them. This is how inheritance truly works. Not through memory, but through environment. A child does not need to be taught that the world is ordered. They feel it in schedules, in expectations, in consequences. Order becomes atmosphere. The ancient world understood atmosphere better than argument. They did not persuade people into obedience. They surrounded them with repetition. The same movements, the same words, the same times. Morning followed night. Seasons returned. Rituals repeated. Nothing surprising. Nothing unstable. Stability is not exciting, but it is comforting. And comfort is what allows societies to survive. This is why early systems did not value speed. They valued endurance. A rule that lasts is better than a rule that inspires. An order that holds is better than a freedom that collapses. This perspective shaped everything. Buildings were made heavy, not beautiful. Law was written slowly, not creatively. Change was treated as risk, not opportunity. The goal was continuation, and continuation required restraint. Over generations, restraint became invisible. People no longer felt limited. They felt oriented. Orientation is the opposite of confusion. You know where you are. You know what comes next. Sleep works the same way. The body relaxes when it knows nothing unexpected will happen. That is why this story does not surprise you. It is not meant to. It is meant to hold you. Long before entertainment existed, stories were tools, not for excitement, but for regulation. They regulated fear. They regulated behavior. They regulated time. A story that repeats structure teaches the nervous system to trust. Trust allows rest. This is why ancient myths feel slow to modern readers. They are not inefficient. They are deliberate. Nothing important happens quickly. Order unfolds. It does not rush. And because it does not rush, it endures. As the world grew more complex, the systems grew quieter. They no longer needed gods with faces. They no longer needed stories with names. They only needed principles. Principles are harder to remove than gods. You can forget a name. You cannot forget a rule you live by. This is why the deepest inheritances are invisible. We do not feel ruled by ancient belief. We feel guided by common sense. But common sense is not universal. It is cultural memory. Memory refined until it feels natural. When you follow a rule without knowing why, you are touching the past. Not consciously, but structurally. The past does not live in stories alone. It lives in expectations. In the quiet sense that some things should not be done, even when they could be. That some actions feel wrong, even when they benefit us. That some limits feel necessary, even when no one enforces them. This is inherited order, not imposed, not taught, absorbed. And because it is absorbed, it does not feel heavy. It feels normal. Normal is the most powerful force in human behavior. Normal does not argue. Normal does not threaten. Normal simply repeats. And repetition calms. As your breathing slows, notice how the mind stops reaching forward. There is nothing ahead to prepare for. No revelation waiting. No conclusion required. The systems described here do not demand understanding. They function without it. Just as your body knows how to sleep, without instruction. Just as the night arrives, without announcement. You are not expected to stay awake for meaning. Meaning has already been assigned, long before you were here. And because it has been assigned, you can rest. Nothing will fall apart while you sleep. Order does not depend on awareness. It was designed to survive absence. The ancient world knew this. They built systems that could endure, without attention, without memory, without belief. That is why they lasted. And that is why you can let go. Let thoughts soften. Let structure carry you. There is no need to follow the words closely. They are only here to maintain rhythm. Rhythm is enough. The rest will continue on its own. And once order became invisible, it became permanent. The most powerful systems are not the ones that announce themselves. They are the ones that no longer need explanation. When people stop asking why rules exist, the rules have succeeded. Early civilizations understood this instinctively. They did not try to persuade. They normalized. Children grew up watching rituals performed without debate. Contracts were honored without discussion. Time was obeyed without complaint. The system did not argue its authority. It assumed it. And assumption is stronger than belief. Belief can be challenged. Assumption cannot. This is why the most enduring structures do not feel oppressive. They feel natural. We do not wake each morning questioning gravity. We do not debate the passing of time. We do not vote on cause and effect. Order, once internalized, feels inevitable. The ancient world did not describe order as comfort. It described it as necessity. Chaos was not romantic. Chaos was hunger, flood, disappearance. So stability became sacred. Not sacred in the sense of worship, but sacred in the sense of protection. Something you do not touch, unless you want everything else to break. This is why early laws were carved into stone. Not because stone lasts, but because stone resists change. The message was clear. This does not belong to you. You inherit it. You obey it. You pass it on. The law did not ask to be loved. It asked to be preserved. And preservation requires restraint. Over time, restraint became virtue. Patience became moral. Obedience became wisdom. Not because humans were weak, but because systems were fragile. Large societies cannot survive constant negotiation. They require predictability. Predictability allows trust. Trust allows cooperation. Cooperation allows survival. And survival, for most of history, was the highest achievement. This is why the earliest stories do not celebrate personal fulfillment. They celebrate continuity, lineages, cities, seasons returning as expected. The hero is not the one who changes the world. The hero is the one who keeps it from collapsing. Even today, we quietly admire stability more than brilliance. A system that works is praised. A system that collapses is blamed. We rarely ask who invented the system. We ask why it failed. This instinct is ancient. As belief systems traveled, they adapted to new landscapes. Deserts required water loss. Rivers required flood management. Mountains required boundaries. But the core idea remained untouched. That rules precede rulers. That order precedes freedom. That meaning exists before choice. This idea shaped not only governance, but identity. People understood themselves not as isolated individuals, but as roles within a structure. Farmer, scribe, builder, guardian. Identity was functional, not expressive. You were what you maintained. Modern identity feels different, but it still carries this inheritance. We define ourselves by occupation, by responsibility, by contribution. Even rebellion defines itself in relation to structure. You cannot rebel against nothing. Rebellion proves the existence of the system it opposes. This is the quiet paradox. The more we challenge structure, the more we confirm its presence. This is why total freedom feels disorienting. Without reference points, the mind drifts. Without limits, choices lose meaning. Meaning requires boundaries. The ancient world knew this. They did not see boundaries as cages. They saw them as shape. Shape allows function. Function allows purpose. Purpose allows rest. When everything has its place, nothing needs to rush. This is why ancient time felt slower. Not because clocks were inaccurate, but because urgency was limited. You worked when it was time to work. You rested when it was time to rest. Time was not optimized. It was accepted. Modern anxiety comes not from speed, but from infinite expectation. We believe everything could be different, so everything feels unfinished. Ancient systems did not offer infinite possibility. They offered certainty. Certainty calms the nervous system. This is why rituals repeat, why phrases are spoken the same way, why movements are precise. Repetition signals safety. Nothing unexpected will happen here. Sleep itself follows this logic. The body relaxes when it knows what comes next. This story does not rush, because rushing implies uncertainty. There is nothing uncertain here. Order continues. Structure holds. You do not need to understand it fully. You only need to feel its consistency. Consistency is what allows rest. As your breathing slows, notice how thought becomes softer, not because it disappears, but because it no longer needs to solve anything. The systems existed before you. They will continue after you. For now, you are simply passing through them. And passing through does not require effort. Let the mind loosen its grip. Nothing depends on your attention. The structures do not weaken when you sleep. They were built for endurance. Long before you, humans learned how to make order last. And because it lasts, you are free to rest. And as the centuries moved forward, something subtle happened. The structures remained, but the stories that once explained them grew quieter. Names faded. Rituals softened. The original language of belief became symbolic rather than literal. Yet nothing essential was removed. Authority still required justification. Law still claimed precedence over power. Time still demanded obedience. Only the explanation changed. Where once people said, "The gods have decreed," later they said, "Nature requires," or "Reason demands." But the demand itself never vanished. This transition was not sudden. It happened slowly, so slowly that no generation noticed it. A council of gods became a council of elders. A divine judgment became a legal verdict. A cosmic order became a natural law. Different words, same structure. And because the structure worked, it survived. Consider how deeply this assumption now lives inside us. We expect systems to be fair, even when they are not. We expect causes to have reasons, even when randomness is possible. We expect history to make sense, even when it often does not. These expectations are not guaranteed by reality. They are inherited from a worldview that assumed reality itself was organized. When that assumption breaks, we call it tragedy. When it holds, we call it normal. Normal is not natural. Normal is learned. The earliest civilizations understood this intuitively. They did not try to convince people of order. They embedded it into everything, into architecture, into schedules, into economics. Even silence had a place. Temples were designed not only to gather people, but to slow them. High ceilings, repetitive rituals, measured movements. The body learned obedience before the mind understood why. This is not oppression. This is training. Training a population to live within constraints, without constant violence. Modern societies still do this. We stand in lines. We wait for signals. We follow procedures. No god enforces this. No king commands it. The structure does. And because we internalize it, external force becomes unnecessary. This is the deepest success of early belief systems. They taught humans to govern themselves, not through fear alone, but through expectation. Expectation is quieter than fear. It works even when no one is watching. This is why so many ancient texts speak of watchers, not necessarily beings, but presence. The idea that actions are seen, recorded, counted. Today, we call this accountability. But accountability does not need eyes. It needs memory. Memory of consequence. This memory persists even when origins are forgotten. We no longer know who first taught humanity that order must exist before action. We only know that we still behave as if it does. And this behavior shapes the world. When a system collapses, people feel disoriented, not because rules are gone, but because meaning dissolves. Without structure, choices multiply beyond comfort. Too much freedom feels like chaos. This is why humans rebuild systems quickly after collapse. Even broken systems feel safer than no system at all. The past understood this. It did not offer unlimited freedom. It offered stability. And stability, for most of human history, was the highest good. You can see this in how early societies understood time. Time was not something you owned. It was something you obeyed. Days were assigned purposes. Seasons had obligations. Years carried expectations. Modern language still reflects this. We say we owe time. We spend time. We waste time. These metaphors assume time has authority over us. It does not, naturally, but it does, culturally. This cultural inheritance is older than philosophy. It was born in fields, in canals, in storage rooms, where grain had to last through winter. Survival required coordination. Coordination required trust. Trust required enforcement beyond personality. And so belief became system. As this system spread, it adapted. Different lands, different climates, different languages. But the core remained. That life must be structured. That structure must be justified. That justification must be external. Even when societies rejected old gods, they replaced them carefully, never with nothing, always with something higher. Reason, nature, the people, the state. The label changes. The position does not. There is always a place above individuals, where authority resides. This place is empty of people, but full of meaning. And it is this emptiness that gives it power. No one can challenge it directly, because no one stands there. Only principles. This is not accidental. It is the final evolution of a very old idea. An idea born when humans first learned. They could not live together without pretending something larger than themselves was in charge. As you rest now, there is no need to resolve this. Understanding does not require effort. The mind can drift, while structure remains. The world does not depend on your attention. It continues, because it has learned how. Long before us, humans discovered something fragile and essential. That order must feel older than choice. And so they made it so. You are not required to agree with this. You already live inside it. And for now, that is enough. Let the thoughts slow. Let the patterns fade. Nothing needs to be decided tonight. The structures will remain, whether you watch them or not. And you can rest. And once this way of thinking took root, it began to shape not only how societies were organized, but how humans understood themselves. People did not see themselves as authors of order. They saw themselves as participants within it. This distinction matters. When order is believed to be older than humanity, responsibility changes form. Actions are no longer judged only by outcome, but by alignment. Did this action preserve balance? Did it respect the structure? Did it maintain what already existed? In such a worldview, morality is not invented by consensus. It is discovered through obedience. This is why early laws feel less like arguments and more like restorations. They are not framed as innovations. They are framed as corrections. Again and again, early rulers described their role not as creators, but as restorers of justice that had somehow drifted out of alignment. Justice was assumed to exist already. Human failure was simply deviation. This belief quietly reshaped how failure itself was understood. A famine was not merely bad weather. It was imbalance. A flood was not random catastrophe. It was reset. A collapse of a city was not poor leadership alone. It was withdrawal of order. The universe, in this understanding, was not neutral. It responded. And because it responded, human behavior mattered, not because humans were powerful, but because they were responsible. Responsibility is heavier than power. Power can be lost. Responsibility remains. This is why early myths do not celebrate freedom. They celebrate alignment. Heroes are not those who break rules, but those who understand their place. Even rebellion, when it appears, is framed not as liberation, but as disruption. Disruption is always temporary. Order returns. It always does. Over time, names changed. Symbols shifted. Languages evolved. But the assumption survived. That order exists independently of belief. That it can be violated, but never erased. As centuries passed, and civilizations rose and fell, the visible structures of belief began to thin. Gods merged. Pantheons simplified. Stories were edited, reinterpreted, softened. But the skeleton beneath remained intact. Law continued to claim authority beyond rulers. Morality continued to claim existence beyond opinion. Time continued to be measured, regulated, segmented. Calendars survived even when temples fell. This is not coincidence. Calendars are obedience written into days. They tell you when to work, when to rest, when to begin, when to stop. Even now, we live by inherited rhythms. Weeks, years, deadlines. We feel anxiety not because time is short, but because time is structured. Structure implies expectation. Expectation implies judgment. Judgment implies something watching, even when no one is. This is the quiet inheritance. Not gods watching from the sky, but systems watching from within us. Rules we obey even when alone. Limits we respect without force. Ask yourself gently, without urgency, why do we feel guilt, even when no one knows? Why do we feel relief when rules are followed? Why does injustice disturb us, even when it does not affect us personally? These reactions are not biological instincts. They are learned orientations. They belong to a world where order mattered more than freedom, because freedom without structure leads to collapse. The earliest cities learned this lesson early. They encoded it into stone, into ritual, into memory, and memory outlived belief. When later cultures inherited these systems, they often believed they were inventing something new. Philosophy, ethics, law. But invention implies choice, and choice implies alternatives. There were fewer alternatives than we imagine. Once a society learns to function through impersonal authority, it cannot return to purely personal rule. Once law exists above individuals, it cannot be easily removed. Even revolutions preserve it. They do not abolish structure. They replace its symbols. This is why new regimes always write new constitutions. They cannot govern without pretending something precedes them. They need legitimacy that is older than power. And so the ancient logic continues. not as belief, but as assumption. Assumptions are stronger than beliefs. They do not require defense. They shape thought before thought becomes conscious. This is why the past never truly disappears. It reorganizes itself. Inside the present, we imagine history as a sequence of events. But history is also a sequence of frameworks. And frameworks, once adopted, are rarely questioned. They simply become reality. Tonight is not about uncovering hidden gods. It is about noticing inherited structure, the quiet rules we follow, without remembering who taught them, the order we assume, without knowing its origin, the sense that meaning must exist, even when we cannot define it. This sense did not emerge naturally. It was learned, and learning, once complete, feels indistinguishable from instinct. As you listen, there is nothing you need to conclude, no belief to adopt, no theory to accept, only an awareness that long before us, humans learned how to live inside systems larger than themselves. And those systems, gentle or strict, visible or invisible, are still holding us now. You do not need to stay awake for this. Understanding is not required. The mind can rest, while structure continues. Order does not sleep, but you can. Before there were names for time, before history learned how to count itself, there was already structure, not stories, not myths, not belief. Structure, the kind that does not ask to be remembered, because it continues whether anyone remembers it or not. Tonight is not about gods in the way modern minds imagine them. It is about something quieter, something older, the invisible architecture that allowed human societies to exist long before anyone agreed on what the world meant, long before temples rose, long before kings spoke in absolutes, long before law pretended to be neutral. There was already an assumption, rarely spoken, never questioned, that order exists first, and humans enter it later. We often imagine the past as chaotic, small tribes, loose rules, survival by instinct alone. But the archaeological record tells a different story. The moment humans began to write, they were not experimenting, they were recording. Not dreams, not poetry, records, grain tallies, labor assignments, boundary agreements, calendars aligned to the sky. Writing did not emerge to tell stories. It emerged to maintain systems. And embedded within those systems was a belief so foundational that it no longer needed explanation, that authority must be justified, that law exists above rulers, that disorder is not a starting point, but a failure. This belief did not grow slowly. It arrived complete. In southern Mesopotamia, around the late 4th millennium BCE, cities appeared with startling speed. Urban planning, specialized labor, centralized storage, religious institutions acting as economic hubs, and alongside them, without any visible trial phase, appeared a fully articulated worldview, a cosmos divided into roles, a hierarchy of responsibility, a moral structure enforced beyond human preference, not invented, assumed. The names varied across time and culture, but the logic did not. What mattered was not who ruled, but that rulership itself was secondary to something older. Kings did not create law, they received it. Judges did not invent justice, they interpreted it. Human authority was never primary, it was delegated. This idea is so familiar to us now that it feels natural, but it is not. It had to be learned, and once learned, it changed everything. Consider what happens when a society grows beyond memory, when people no longer know each other personally, when trust cannot rely on kinship, when violence becomes too costly to manage every dispute. At that moment, force alone fails. You need something else, something impersonal, something that exists even when no one is watching. You need order that does not belong to anyone. The earliest civilizations solved this not with technology, but with belief. Not belief in the supernatural, but belief in structure. They encoded that structure into the sky, into calendars, into rituals, into law. They taught people not that gods were powerful, but that power itself answered to something higher. This is why the earliest texts feel administrative rather than mystical, because mysticism was not the goal. Stability was. Temples functioned as banks. priests as accountants, rituals as schedules. Even the heavens were organized. Stars were not beautiful, they were punctual. Planets were not mysteries, they were markers. Time itself became regulated, not to understand the universe, but to survive within it. Agriculture demanded precision, irrigation demanded coordination, trade demanded trust, and trust required enforcement beyond human whim. So belief became infrastructure, not something you felt, but something you relied on. Once embedded, it no longer needed explanation. Children were born into it. Language carried it. Law assumed it. By the time philosophers appeared, the foundation was already invisible. They debated justice, never asking why justice must exist at all. They argued over authority, never questioning the assumption that authority required legitimacy. That assumption came from somewhere, not from reason, not from science, not from democracy, from the first civilizations that learned a dangerous truth, that humans cannot organize themselves at scale without pretending that order existed before them. This is not deception, it is survival. And once learned, it could not be unlearned. And as this steady flow carries on, the sense of time itself begins to loosen. Minutes no longer feel separate. Moments stop standing apart. They blend. The ancient world lived inside this blending. Time was not divided into urgency and delay. It was experienced as continuity. Continuity does not rush. It unfolds. This unfolding was trusted. Trust reduces vigilance. Vigilance keeps the mind alert. Alertness prevents rest. The systems of the past were built to reduce vigilance, not by removing danger, but by making danger predictable. Predictable danger is manageable. Unpredictable danger overwhelms. So cycles were emphasized. Floods came, but they came within seasons. Droughts arrived, but they were expected. Expectation softened fear. Fear without expectation paralyzes. Paralysis threatened survival. So expectation became structure. Structure created rhythm. Rhythm created reassurance. Reassurance allowed sleep, even in uncertain times. Sleep was necessary. A sleepless society collapses. The ancient world learned this early. It did not glorify exhaustion. It avoided it. Rest was not indulgence. It was preservation. Preservation mattered more than speed. Speed increases error. Error multiplies in complex systems. Complex systems require calm operators. Calm operators require rest. So rest was protected. Night was night. Day was day. Boundaries were respected. Blurring boundaries creates confusion. Confusion leads to mistakes. Mistakes cost resources. Resources were limited. Everything returned to economy, not money, but energy. Energy management was constant. Physical energy, emotional energy, social energy. Systems were designed to conserve all three. This conservation created resilience. Resilience absorbed shock. Shock was inevitable. Earth moved. Water rose. Disease spread. The question was never how to avoid shock, but how to survive it. Survival required order. Order required acceptance. Acceptance did not mean approval. It meant alignment with reality. Reality had limits. Limits were acknowledged. Acknowledgement reduced struggle. Struggle drains energy. The ancient world avoided unnecessary struggle. This avoidance shaped behavior. Less confrontation, more adaptation. Adaptation is quieter than resistance. Resistance attracts attention. Attention escalates conflict. Escalation destabilizes. So conflict was contained quickly, through mediation, through ritual, through repetition of norms. Norms stabilized interaction. When everyone knows the rules, less explanation is needed. Explanation invites debate. Debate slows response. Slow response in crisis can be fatal. So response was streamlined. Not everything required discussion. Many things were already decided. Decision ahead of time reduces stress later. This is why early laws were broad. They did not account for every case. They set patterns. Patterns guide action without requiring analysis. Analysis consumes energy. Energy was conserved. This conservation is still felt. Modern discomfort with ambiguity. comes from the same inheritance. We want clear procedures, clear expectations. When procedures fail, anxiety rises. Anxiety signals loss of structure. Loss of structure feels dangerous, even when it is not. This feeling is ancient. It is not rational. It is learned through generations that depended on structure for survival. As you listen now, nothing is ambiguous here. Nothing changes direction suddenly. The rhythm is consistent. Consistency signals safety. Your body responds, even if your mind drifts. Breathing slows. Muscles soften. Attention loosens. This is alignment, not with an idea, but with rhythm. Rhythm does not ask for belief. It only requires presence. Presence can fade without consequence. The ancient world did not require constant presence. People slept. Systems continued. The sun rose. Fields grew. The system was larger than any individual. This knowledge was comforting. You did not have to hold everything together. No one did. The structure held itself. This reduced fear of absence. Absence was safe. Safe absence allows rest. Rest restores. Restoration allows continuation. Continuation is the quiet goal. Not progress. Not perfection. Continuation. This is why ancient thinking feels circular. Circles return. Return is comforting. There is no edge to reach. No moment to arrive at. Only ongoing movement. As this movement continues, you are free to follow it loosely. There is nothing to miss. Nothing hidden. No final meaning approaching. Just continuity. And continuity does not require awareness. It happens regardless. You can drift further. The words will continue, whether you notice them or not. The structure remains. It always has. And because it remains, you can rest inside it. Nothing ends here. Nothing begins. The flow continues quietly. And as this steady movement continues, the idea of beginning and ending softens even more. The ancient world did not measure life by milestones alone. It measured by continuity, not by what started, but by what endured. Endurance does not announce itself. It does not celebrate. It simply remains. This is why so many ancient structures feel quiet. They were not built to impress. They were built to last. Lasting requires patience. Patience stretches time. When time stretches, pressure fades. Pressure creates urgency. Urgency fractures attention. So attention was guided gently, not pulled forward, not pushed back. Held attention is calm attention. Calm attention allows the body to settle into itself. The ancient world valued this settling, not as relaxation, but as readiness without tension. A system that is always tense eventually breaks. So tension was released regularly, through routine, through repetition, through familiarity. Familiarity reduces cognitive load. When something is familiar, the mind does not need to evaluate it. Evaluation consumes energy. Energy was conserved carefully. This conservation shaped culture deeply. It shaped how people spoke. Speech was slower. Words were fewer. Silence was acceptable. Silence was not awkward. Silence allowed space for rhythm to be felt. In silence, breathing becomes noticeable. Breathing steadies. Steady breathing signals safety. Safety allows rest. This chain is simple, but powerful. The ancient world lived inside it. Modern life often interrupts it, but interruption is not permanent. The body remembers how to return. Return is what this flow offers. Not instruction, not insight. Return. Return to a pace that does not demand. Demand keeps the mind alert. Alertness blocks sleep, so nothing here demands. There is no lesson to extract, no conclusion to reach, only movement without direction. Direction creates expectation. Expectation creates tension. Tension creates wakefulness. Here, direction dissolves. The flow moves evenly, like water across flat ground. No drop rushes ahead. No drop lags behind. Everything moves together. This togetherness is soothing. The ancient world depended on it. Isolation was dangerous. Togetherness protected. Protection was not emotional. It was structural. Structures kept people aligned. Alignment reduced conflict. Reduced conflict preserved energy. Preserved energy allowed recovery. Recovery sustained life. This cycle repeated, and repetition created trust. Trust does not require certainty. It requires consistency. Consistency is present here. Sentence follows sentence. Without surprise. Tone remains unchanged. Nothing escalates. Escalation would wake the mind. The absence of escalation allows it to drift. You do not need to hold on to meaning. Meaning can blur. Blurring is safe here. Nothing relies on clarity. Clarity is for action. Action is not required. This moment does not ask for action. It allows stillness. Stillness is not emptiness. It is fullness without motion. The ancient world recognized this. That fullness does not need activity. It only needs balance. Balance is maintained quietly. When balance holds, systems breathe. When systems breathe, people rest. Rest restores. Restoration is invisible. No one notices it happening. You only notice when it is absent. Right now, nothing is absent. The structure is intact. The rhythm continues. You are not required to monitor it. Monitoring keeps you awake. Release allows sleep. You can release, not because something ends, but because nothing changes. Change requires attention. Sameness allows surrender. This sameness is intentional. It is not monotony. It is safety. Safety lets the body turn inward. As thoughts slow further, they may begin to drift apart. This is natural. Drifting does not break the flow. The flow does not depend on thought. It existed before thought. It continues without it. You are inside it now. Without effort, nothing needs to be held. Nothing needs to be understood. Nothing needs to be completed. The ancient systems were built on this principle. That continuity is stronger than awareness. And continuity is present here. You can rest within it. The words will continue. Like background motion, you do not need to follow. Just allow. The structure remains. The rhythm holds. And the flow goes on. And as this flow remains unbroken, the mind slowly releases its need to keep track. Tracking requires effort. Effort keeps attention tight. The ancient world did not ask for constant tracking. It trusted continuity. Continuity does not need supervision. It moves whether anyone watches or not. This trust shaped everything. Paths were worn into the ground by repeated steps. No one questioned where they led. They led where they always had. Familiar routes calm the body. The body relaxes when it knows the terrain. The ancient world made life familiar on purpose. Familiarity reduced risk. Risk was not exciting. Risk was dangerous. So novelty was introduced slowly. Nothing changed all at once. Gradual change is easier to absorb. Absorption prevents shock. Shock disrupts balance. Balance was protected. Protected quietly. Quiet protection is the most effective kind. Loud protection attracts resistance. Resistance drains systems. So systems learn it to be subtle. Subtlety does not announce itself. It blends. The structures of the past blended into daily life. You did not see them. You lived inside them. Living inside structure does not feel like constraint. It feels like ground. Ground supports without effort. You do not think about the ground. When it holds you, you only notice it. When it disappears, the ancient world made sure it did not disappear. Everything reinforced it. Stories, schedules, spaces, even tools reinforce structure. Tools were designed to guide movement. A plow guides hands. A loom guides rhythm. Guided movement reduces error. Reduced error conserves energy. Energy conservation was constant. This conservation extended to thought itself. Thinking was directed, not suppressed. Directed. Questions were asked within limits. Limits prevent confusion. Confusion slows response. Response speed mattered in uncertain environments. So clarity was prioritized. Clear roles, clear duties, clear consequences. Ambiguity was minimized. Minimization of ambiguity creates calm. Calm supports cooperation. Cooperation sustains communities. This logic is simple. Its simplicity is why it survived. Complex explanations fade. Simple structures endure. The ancient world built simple structures, capable of holding complexity. This is different from building complex rules. Simple structures adapt. Complex rules break. Adaptation keeps systems alive. Life requires adaptation, but adaptation within bounds. Bounds preserve identity. Identity allowed continuity. Without identity, systems dissolve. This is why symbols mattered, not for meaning alone, but for recognition. A symbol marks continuity. Seeing it reassures. Reassurance allows the mind to soften. Softening reduces tension. Reduced tension allows sleep. Sleep was essential. Sleep restores clarity. Clarity improves response. Response sustains survival. Everything returns to this cycle. Cycle over line. Return over progress. The ancient world trusted return. Return means nothing is lost. Even when something ends, something familiar resumes. This is why endings were softened. Rituals marked them. Death was framed as return to pattern, not disappearance. Disappearance creates fear. Return creates acceptance. Acceptance reduces struggle. Struggle drains energy. Energy was preserved. Preservation allowed endurance. Endurance defined success. Not victory, not dominance. Endurance. Endurance feels quiet. Quiet does not demand attention. You do not need to stay awake for quiet. Quiet continues, whether you notice it or not. As you listen now, the flow does not change. Nothing accelerates. Nothing resolves. This is intentional. Resolution wakes the mind. Unresolved continuity allows drift. Drift is safe here. Nothing depends on your focus. The systems described were designed for absence, for sleep, for forgetting, for continuation without supervision. You can trust this. Trust relaxes the body. Relaxation allows deeper rest. Deeper rest restores. Restoration sustains. Sustainment allows continuation, and continuation is present now. The rhythm holds. The structure remains. The words move evenly. You do not need to follow them. They are simply there, like the ground beneath you, like the night around you, holding quietly. Let attention loosen further. There is no edge approaching, no ending waiting, just steady movement. And steady movement does not require effort. You can rest inside it. The flow goes on. Nothing needs to change. For the system to continue, change is optional. Continuity is essential. The ancient world understood this deeply. It built life around repetition, because repetition stabilizes. Stability reduces uncertainty. Uncertainty tightens the mind. A tight mind resists rest. So environments were shaped to soften the mind. Even time was softened. Time was not rushed. Days followed known patterns. Mornings opened slowly. Evenings closed gently. Transitions mattered. Abrupt transitions disrupt. Gentle transitions carry the body from one state to another. This is why thresholds were marked. Doors, gates, bridges. Crossing signaled adjustment. Adjustment prepares the nervous system. Preparation prevents shock. Shock was avoided. Shock scatters attention. Scattered attention invites danger. So attention was guided. Guidance does not feel like control. When it is familiar, familiar guidance feels natural. Natural feels safe. Safety allows surrender. Surrender allows rest. Rest restores function. Function supports continuity. The same pattern appears everywhere. In agriculture, in governance, in storytelling. Stories did not surprise abruptly. They unfolded slowly. Listeners knew the shape before the details. Knowing the shape calms anticipation. Anticipation, when unmanaged, creates tension. Managed anticipation soothes. This is why stories repeated motifs. The listener could relax. Nothing unexpected would harm them. Even danger in stories was contained. Contained danger teaches without fear. Fear paralyzes. Learning requires openness. Openness appears when threat is limited. So threat was ritualized. Controlled. Bound. Bounded chaos is instructive. Unbounded chaos is destructive. The ancient world mastered this balance. It allowed chaos only within frames. Frames hold energy. Energy held is useful. Energy released without direction dissipates. Dissipation weakens systems. So energy was guided. Rituals guided it. Schedules guided it. Architecture guided it. Even silence guided it. Silence is not absence. Silence is structure. Without sound, it creates space. Space allows breathing. Breathing regulates the body. Regulation maintains equilibrium. Equilibrium supports endurance. Endurance again. Always endurance. Not excitement. Not constant growth. Just enough. Enough is stable. More is risky. Less is fragile. Enough is balance. Balance is quiet. Quiet does not call attention. You can drift in it. The mind does not need to hold anything. There is nothing to remember. Nothing to resolve. No conclusion forming. This is intentional. Conclusion wakes curiosity. Curiosity activates thought. Thought pulls upward. This flow moves downward. Downward is safe. Downward is heavy. Heavy anchors. Anchors keep systems from drifting apart. You are not drifting apart. You are held. Held by rhythm. Held by repetition. Held by continuity. The words do not demand meaning. They do not build toward insight. Insight is sharp. Sharp edges wake awareness. This is smooth. Smooth surfaces allow sliding. Sliding requires no effort. Effort dissolves. As effort dissolves, the body settles. Settling deepens. Depth quiets. Quiet lengthens. Length has no boundary. You do not need to track time. Time is moving without your attention. This is how it was designed. Systems that require attention fail when attention sleeps. So the most successful systems function without it. They hum quietly. They persist invisibly. Like breath. Like pulse. Like night. You do not manage them. They manage themselves. And while they do, you can rest. There is nothing you need to do. Nothing you need to hold. Just the steady movement continuing. And it will continue, whether you notice or not. And so the movement continues without asking anything of you. Nothing is expected. Nothing is required. The system does not need witnesses. It only needs continuity. Continuity does not announce itself. It does not hurry. It repeats quietly until repetition becomes background. Background fades. When background fades, the mind loosens its grip. Loose attention drifts naturally. Drift is not loss. Drift is transition. Transitions are where rest begins. The ancient world trusted transitions. They did not rush between states. They allowed dusk. They allowed dawn. They allowed the in-between. Between waking and sleeping is where thought dissolves. This space is wide. There is no edge to reach. No point to arrive at. You do not move forward. You simply sink into a slower rhythm. Slower does not mean weaker. Slower is heavier. Heavier settles. Settling creates stillness. Stillness is not silence. Stillness is stability. Stability feels like being held without hands. Nothing presses. Nothing pulls. Everything stays. The body recognizes this. It has known it before. Long before words. Long before stories. Before counting time. Before measuring progress. The body remembers how to rest. It remembers cycles. Breath in. Breath out. Pulse. Pause. These patterns do not explain themselves. They do not argue. They simply continue. And because they continue, everything else can stop. Thoughts slow first. They lose urgency. Then they lose sequence. Then they lose shape. They become fragments. Fragments dissolve. What remains is weight. Comfortable weight. Grounding weight. The kind that keeps you from floating upward. Upward movement requires effort. Downward movement does not. You are allowed to move downward. Nothing follows you there. Nothing demands response. There is no signal to answer. No memory to review. No future to prepare. Preparation belongs to daylight. This time belongs to release. Release is safe when structure remains. The structure is still here. You do not need to see it. You do not need to understand it. Understanding is not necessary. Presence is enough. Even presence fades. And that is fine. Fading is not disappearance. It is softening. Edges soften. Sound softens. Awareness softens. Until even softness does not need attention. The rhythm holds itself. Like waves that do not need counting. Like wind that does not need naming. Like night that does not ask permission. The world continues without effort. You are part of that continuation. Not as action. Not as thought. Just as quiet participation. There is nothing to fix. Nothing to complete. Nothing to conclude. The moment does not move toward an ending. It stretches. It widens. It becomes indistinct. And indistinct is restful. Rest does not require awareness. It only requires safety. You are safe inside the repetition. Inside the calm. Inside the steady continuation. Nothing interrupts. Nothing begins. Nothing ends. Only the slow, even movement carrying everything gently forward without needing your attention. There is no direction now. Only presence without focus. Focus dissolves. When nothing asks for it. Nothing asks. The flow remains even. Evenness is calming. Calm does not arrive suddenly. It spreads. Like warmth through still water. Like darkness filling a room. Without sound. No edge marks the moment. It simply becomes. Breath moves on its own. You do not guide it. You do not correct it. Correction is effort. Effort is unnecessary here. The body knows how to rest. It learned it long before thought. Long before words organized experience. Before memory began sorting. Before identity took shape. The deeper rhythms do not require identity. They existed before names. They continue without them. You are not needed to maintain them. That is the relief. Responsibility releases. The need to hold things together fades. Things remain together. Without you, the world does not fall apart. When attention softens, it stabilizes. Stability is quiet. Quiet is not empty. Quiet is full of continuation. A steady hum beneath awareness. Not audible, just felt. And then not even felt. Feeling gives way to weight. The weight does not press. It supports. Support is different from control. Control tightens. Support allows. Allowing creates ease. Ease deepens. Depth becomes indistinct. Indistinct becomes comforting. Comfort has no shape. It does not point. It does not signal. It does not guide. It simply is. And because it simply is, there is nothing else to do. Nothing to check. Nothing to anticipate. No next step forming. The idea of next softens. Sequence loosens. Time stretches thin. Moments overlap. The edges between them blur. Blurred edges do not demand attention. They invite release. Release does not feel like falling. It feels like staying. Staying inside one calm place. Without needing to move. Movement slows. Then movement stops being noticed. The mind does not track it. The body carries itself. The breath counts itself. The night holds everything else. You are held. Without grip. Without pressure. Without intention. Held the way darkness holds sound. The way sleep holds thought. The way stillness holds motion. Without stopping it. Nothing needs to be remembered. Nothing needs to be finished. Nothing needs to be concluded. The flow continues quietly, as it always has, as it will, and you do not need to stay awake for it. Nothing changes, and that is what allows everything to rest. When change stops asking for attention, the mind loosens. Loose attention drifts downward, not away, not lost, just deeper into stillness. Stillness does not arrive suddenly. It layers itself. One layer settles, then another, each layer quieter than the one before. The surface remains calm. Beneath it, nothing moves quickly. Speed belongs to daylight. Night belongs to wait. Wait anchors. Anchors prevent wandering. Wandering requires direction. There is no direction here, only continuation. Continuation does not need awareness. It happens whether you watch or not. The body understands this. It releases control gradually. Muscles soften. Without instruction. Breath finds its own pace. Not slow, not fast, just even. Evenness is comforting. Comfort reduces vigilance. Vigilance fades when nothing threatens. sounds. Nothing threatens. The environment is steady. Sound is predictable. Words repeat their shape. Repetition is not boring. Repetition is reassuring. It signals safety. Safety allows depth. Depth removes edges. Edges define effort. Without edges, effort dissolves. And with effort gone, rest becomes natural. You are not trying to sleep. Trying wakes the mind. This is not trying. This is allowing. Allowing is passive. Passive does not mean weak. Passive means supported. Supported means you do not hold yourself. You are held by rhythm, by pacing, by continuity. The same way ancient knights held entire cities. No lights, no signals, only cycles. Darkness was trusted because darkness had structure. Stars followed paths. Seasons returned. Rivers rose and fell. Nothing chaotic. Nothing rushed. Even uncertainty had limits. Limits calm the nervous system. Unlimited possibility excites. Excitement resists sleep. Limits soothe. Here, the limits are gentle. No sudden turns. No sharp ideas. No conclusions forming. Just the steady unfolding of sound and pause. Pause matters. Between words. Between breaths. Between thoughts. Pauses widen. Wider pauses hold silence. Silence does not interrupt. It completes. Completion without ending. Ending would signal wakefulness. This does not end. It continues softly until awareness no longer tracks it. Tracking fades. The mind stops counting, stops checking, stops assembling meaning. Meaning is not required, only presence. And presence itself relaxes. It becomes background. Background disappears. What remains is rest. Not sleep yet. Just the edge. The soft edge. Where effort no longer follows. Where nothing pulls you back up. You are allowed to stay here. Nothing will ask you to return quickly. The flow is patient. It has waited before. It will wait again. There is no rush. No clock. No marker. Just the same calm motion, repeating itself gently, until repetition becomes indistinguishable from silence. Nothing needs to be added. Everything essential is already here. The mind notices this and relaxes its search. Searching keeps awareness sharp. Sharpness dissolves now. The edges of thought soften. Ideas no longer connect. They pass quietly, without needing response. Response is effort. Effort fades. The body settles deeper into its own weight. Weight is grounding. Grounding removes urgency. Urgency belongs to movement. Stillness does not rush. Stillness allows time to stretch without notice. Minutes lengthen. Seconds blur. Counting becomes unnecessary. There is no reason to measure. Measurement belongs to action. Action is absent. Only continuation remains. Continuation feels neutral. Neutral feels safe. Safe feels familiar. Familiar does not need attention. The breath follows a steady loop. In, out, pause. The pause grows, slightly longer each time. Longer pauses invite release. Release happens on its own. You do not initiate it. You do not manage it. The body remembers how. This remembering is older than thought, older than language, older than story. It is stored in rhythm, in pulse, in the quiet repetition of life continuing, without instruction. The night supports this memory. Darkness reduces demand. Nothing is expected. Nothing needs to perform. Performance wakes awareness. Here, nothing performs. Even the words do not perform. They do not persuade. They do not build. They simply flow and then pass. Passing leaves space. Space expands. Expanded space holds calm. Calm slows everything. Movement becomes subtle. Subtle becomes unnoticed. Unnoticed becomes irrelevant. And irrelevance is deeply restful. There is no importance here. Nothing to prioritize. Nothing to resolve. The idea of resolution fades. Loose ends soften. They no longer pull. Pulling keeps you alert. Alertness is unnecessary now. The system does not require supervision. It continues without input. Like tides, like weather, like night itself, the mind can step back. Step back without stepping. Just loosen in presence. Awareness spreads thin. Thin awareness drifts. Drift is gentle. Drift is safe. There is no edge to fall from. No depth to fear. Only a wide, quiet space. Where nothing presses inward. The sound remains steady. The pacing remains even. Evenness becomes invisible. Invisible is soothing. Soothing invites release. Release does not announce itself. It simply arrives. When nothing resists it, resistance fades naturally. Nothing encourages it. Nothing opposes it. You are not moving towards sleep. Sleep is approaching you, slowly, without urgency, without force. The closer it comes, the quieter everything becomes. Thoughts lose contrast. Feelings lose definition. Awareness loses shape. And shape is what effort holds. Without shape, effort dissolves completely. There is nothing left to hold. Nothing left to follow. Only the soft continuation, carrying you gently, without asking anything in return.